So aside from the concept of free speech and stuff, it's no mystery why the concept of liberalism has prevailed so strongly and stuff, and why it it was able to play a role in not only the construction and founding of America, but also its prosperity and stuff, despite despite things like all these different stipulations and whatnot. So, um, I'm of the very grounded premise that there must be cultural contrast in a civilization and stuff, um, which is which is why I've always been heavily critical of um, the the right wing philosophies and stuff. These largely contrived beliefs that have basically spread like a pathogen throughout the United States, undermining the sanity and peace of pretty much everybody, undermining the environments and everything. Um, Now, why? But what's like? Where do we derive the need for cultural contrast? Well, traditionally speaking, if we look through historical record, and so the historical record is the favored part of the favored knowledge base for a lot of right wing beliefs and stuff. So, I mean, um, if if you've noticed that I'm going after conservatism and stuff, well, there you go. Um, you've realized where I'm going when I say this and stuff. Throughout history and stuff, every culture has people that suffer greatly that don't need to, and so they don't deserve it. So, um, which, but when you have a civilization of many different cultures and stuff, you give people a chance to get a break and to change. You know, um, there's that. Um, Most cultures throughout history have endorsed or normalized or facilitated things such as child abuse, sexual exploitation, and stuff. The dehumanization of women, um, toxic masculinity, or in other words, the mental or emotional abuse of men, often also the physical abuse of men or dispossession of men and stuff, and other such violations of human rights and stuff. Okay, human rights is not something that can really be redefined past a certain point and stuff because it's one of those superseding principles that must remain the foundation of a respectable civilization. Okay, amongst many other things. And um, the liberal theorists and stuff, John Stuart Mill, John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Voltaire, and such, they were much better at approaching this concept and stuff, because they understood how nature blends with civilization much better, and how nature is natural forces are always going to be at work and stuff. They understood that reason um, and logic have much better traction with pure truth and stuff than with uh, just basically dogma and stuff, or it's this kind of administrative mindset of like, okay, this is what this book says and blah 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 and stuff. They understand that times change and stuff, and not every book is necessarily authoritative and stuff. And in fact, many civilizations over and over have tried to make books eternally authoritative and stuff, with some pretty horrible failures and stuff. Um, and this could be extended to the concept of the legal system as well. So the in the legal system, in legal systems and stuff, laws often do not change, but times do, and because times change, time is being given for science and philosophy, other truth-seeking disciplines and stuff, to discover truths about the reality, past, present, and future and stuff that were not known before. Which means that the law stipulates a social order that is ignorant, that does not take advantage of these new discoveries and stuff, you know, and so on. Uh, and yeah, I feel like that says quite enough on that in the introduction to liberal theory and stuff. Um, the uh, but um, I'm also going to stipulate that a lot of people under the liberal banner and stuff are not actually liberals. So they're just not. They're just not, because in their behavior, they're just showing that they want to, abuse their rights, basically. Um, and honestly, many of the some of those people really end up in jail. So, uh, and so on. Um, Now, is political violence necessary sometimes? Yes. Oh, yes. Um, a lot of people don't want to admit that justice means violence sometimes. But that's why we have arbitration and stuff. That's why we have law enforcement and everything. These are naturally necessitated structures and stuff. Um, and for one example, we have, uh, you know, castle doctrine at home discipline of children and stuff, teenagers. We have and other things that are pretty much universal in our culture in throughout the different cultures of the United States and stuff because they're not only effective but they're necessary to deter bad behavior, which is a start to encouraging good behavior. But I'll admit that with the way the legal system and this system is set up, it's like good behavior is not incentivized as strongly as bad behavior is punished, which has led to a very horrible situation today. So people are very critical of the present day and want progress. They should, honestly. Um, so there's that.
took too long in the shower.